Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I made a video recently on the 10 most common mistakes that D&D players make when playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition for the first time. Here is my promised video on the mistakes that I made and other veterans make playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I thought of giving a straightforward list, but I thought it would be more fun, given that I taught an after-school RPG class for several years, to give a test. So I decided to put on the mean clothing today and put on a suit, at least the upper half. So if you get any questions right today, then your knowledge of the rules is better than mine. You are a true rules lawyer. At the same time, if you don't get any of them right, don't beat yourself up over it. These questions are a bit niche and tricky as well. They kind of remind me of what would be written by a evil law professor. Not that I'm talking about an actual professor I had. Besides, there are so many things that factor in having a successful RPG session than getting the rules right. Still, I thought the rules mistakes I made were going to be pretty common out there, and so worthy of a video. And besides, tests are kind of fun. Now, a caveat, there's going to be some surprises in the rules today that you'll see, and I don't want to give the impression that Pathfinder is a shoddy, poorly made game. In fact, what's remarkable is how few of these situations come up in Pathfinder. In the vast majority of situations, the rules are straightforward and clear. First, the usual introduction. I am Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'm a lawyer who runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. For several years, I ran an after-school, middle school tabletop RPG class. Support my Patreon. I don't make money as an attorney. There's an explanation in the video whose thumbnail is on the screen. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. All right, we're going to go over 5 scenarios, each with its own question. Number 1, there is an ogre, and a monk runs up to it and trips the ogre. The monk also has the stand still feat, which lets him make an attack as a reaction when a foe within his reach does a move action or leaves a square during a move action. If the attack is a critical hit, then it disrupts the move action. Then the ogre tries to stand up, the monk uses stand still and critically succeeds. Question 1, class, is, does this disrupt the stand action? Okay, so look at that, write down your answer. We're going to go to number 2, and we're going to get to the answers at the end. Number 2, Mariciel is a rogue, and she normally does 1d6 plus 4 damage with her rapier. She has the thief subclass, so she gets to add her dexterity to her damage. The rapier also has the deadly d8 trait. That means when she scores a critical hit with it, in addition to doubling all of her damage, she gets to roll a d8 on top of that and add that to the damage. She also does an extra 1d6 precision damage to foes that are off guard to her. She is now flanking a sewer ooze with her ally, Valeros the fighter. The ooze has immunity to critical hits and to precision damage. It also has an armor class of 8. Our rogue rolls an attack roll of 16. Question number 2 is, what damage does she do here? Question number 3 covers the delay action, and I got one rule wrong here, but I decided with this question to kind of cover delay as a whole, so I'm going to ask you to look for several things here. Valeros is a fighter who has walked up to a bandit, and he raises his shield to increase his armor class. This lasts until the start of his next turn. She is immediately after him in initiative. As her last action, she throws a flask of alchemist fire on him, and it hits, and he starts taking persistent damage. He's on fire. However, that is a ranged attack, which triggers his reactive strike reaction, formerly called Attack of Opportunity. So he strikes her as she throws that bomb, and he critically succeeds. He's a high-level fighter, and sword is his weapon group, so he gets access to its critical specialization effect. This makes the bandit off guard until the start of his next turn. His turn's about to come up, and he knows she wants to run away now. His player says, I delay. Now, can you imagine the reasons why his player is doing this? I'll give you a second to think about that. And I'm going to add the fact that this fighter also has the Master of Many Styles feat. When his turn begins, he gets to use a free action to enter one of his stances that he has from one of his feats. Also, he's been surrounded by foes in the meantime, and once he enters that stance, he wants to do 3 actions. He wants to do Whirlwind Strike and strike every foe within his reach. So question number 3 is, well, first of all, what is he trying to do by delaying, and can he do all those things? All right, you're probably going to give yourself more time than I'm giving in this video. Pause the video, I guess, and then I'll now move on to the next one. Number 4, you are a level 9 monk and you fight barehanded. A grappling spirit, a incorporeal creature, runs up to you and then grapples you. Let's assume in this scenario that another creature tripped the monk because, as I learned in this video, grappling spirits can only grab foes and cannot trip them. They otherwise cannot do athletics actions because they're incorporeal. The more you learn! This makes you prone and grabbed. This sucks because you don't want to be prone, you want to stand up. However, you cannot stand up because that's a move action and being grabbed immobilizes you. So you figure, okay, let's get out of this grapple, let's try to escape. When you try to escape in the system, you can use either your acrobatics skill, your athletics skill, or your unarmed attack modifier. And your monk has a bonus of plus 18 on unarmed attacks. And part of that comes from your magical hand wraps, your plus 1 hand wraps of mighty blows. Also, the party bard is singing Courageous Anthem, giving a plus 1 status bonus to attack rolls. So question number 4 is, when you escape with your unarmed attack modifier, what is your bonus? What is your escape bonus? Let's also say that you fail and you need to make a second escape attempt. What is your bonus then? So that's question number 4. All right, pause the video, do what you need to do. Next is the last question. Question number 5. You're a fighter. You wield a sword and a shield, and you get knocked out. And because you're unconscious, you drop everything you're holding. Meanwhile, shields are strapped to you in this system. The question is, after you're healed, can you stand up, pick up a sword, and raise your shield with your 3 actions? That's question number 5. Okay, now we're going to go over the answers and give explanations, of course, for those answers. All right, the first question. The monk who has the stand still feat and the ogre who tries to stand up and the monk critically hits it. Does this disrupt the stand action? The answer is no, it does not disrupt the stand action. Now, I got this wrong because, okay, first, I knew that reactions normally happen after the trigger resolves. However, I thought there might be an exception for this feat. Because when you look at it, it seems like it's intended to disrupt move actions. It says you disrupt that action. So how I would resolve it is, first, the foe stands up, then you use stand still against a standing foe. They're not prone, they have their standing armor class. And if you critically succeed, I turn back time and have them fall down again. So it resolves after they stand up. However, I let them knock them back down when there's a critical hit. However, I was making an exception to the general rule. The general rule applies. And this was clarified by lead designer Logan Bonner in a video that he did with the How It's Played channel. Basically, he said the general rule applies. It's consistent. You only resolve the reaction after the trigger resolves. Now, to clarify, there is one exception in Pathfinder for this general rule, which is when an enemy leaves a square during a move action. Each time an enemy exits a square within your reach, you resolve your reaction, you do your reactive strike or whatever, before they leave that square. It makes sense, right? Because if you resolve it after they leave that square and they're not in your reach anymore, what's the point? Meanwhile, it says if you don't move out of a square, the trigger happens at the end of that triggering ability, which is how reactions normally operate in Pathfinder. So that's true with the stand action. In that video, Logan Bonner explains that they wanted to avoid the problem in first edition Pathfinder and in other editions, where basically you could keep somebody down on the ground forever with reactions. All right, question number 2. This was the rogue doing a flanking attack on an ooze. An ooze that's immune to critical hits and to precision damage. So she normally does 1d6 plus 4 piercing damage with a rapier strike. So what's her damage when she rolls a 16 here? Well, the answer is 1d6 plus 4 plus 1d8. Okay, so let's break that down. First, it's a critical hit. It's a flanked ooze. The ooze is off guard to the rogue. So its armor class is lowered to 6. So her attack roll of 16 is a critical success. It's at least 10 higher than the armor class. And the rogue does sneak attack damage against off-guard foes. However, sneak attack damage is precision damage, and the ooze is immune to that damage. So we don't add sneak attack damage. We also know that it's immune to critical hits, so we don't double the rapier's damage, or the +4 damage bonus. But why do we add the 1d8 from the deadly d8 trait? Well, the reason is because immunity to critical hits is only immunity to the doubling of the damage from critical hits. This is a rule I got wrong, and it's also the one that inspired this video in the first place. So here's how critical hit immunity is explained. It says that they take normal damage instead of double damage. However, this does not make it immune to any other critical success effects of the actions, such as a critical specialization effect or the extra damage of the deadly trait. So our rapier, we don't double the base damage, let's call it, of 1d6 plus 4. However, we do apply the deadly trait to the damage. Things that proc off of the critical hit, basically, but are not the doubling of the damage. There's also a caveat here saying that in some cases, the GM might determine the added effects don't apply. I've looked it up, and apparently the fatal trait on some weapons also is in effect still with enemies that are immune to critical hits. The result here is that if you have a flaming whip, a whip with a flaming rune on it, and you critically hit an ooze, you get the critical effect of that flaming rune. You get to apply persistent fire damage to that ooze, and you get the critical specialization effect from the whip if your class gives you that. And the whip is part of the flail group, so you can knock the ooze prone as well with this critical hit. And yes, oozes can be prone in Pathfinder. It doesn't say they're immune to being prone. Of course, the GM could rule otherwise, but this is the rule. But I like the idea of a off-balance ooze that's jiggling. All right, question number 3. This is the fighter player who wants to delay his turn to accomplish several things. Okay, let's parse what this player is trying to accomplish. Well, the first thing he's trying to do, obviously, is try to avoid, or delay at least, taking that persistent fire damage from the bomb. He also wants to retain the +2 bonus to his armor class from raising his shield. And because he critically hit the bandit with his sword and triggered his critical specialization effect of making her off guard until the start of his next turn, he wants that to continue so his allies can continue to attack her while she's off guard. He's also aware that she wants to run away, and he has his reactive strike reaction and wants to hit her as she attempts to do so. Lastly, and I spelled this out earlier, when he re-enters initiative, he wants to start his turn and enter a stance with one of his feats and do 3 actions on his turn. So here's another moment where you may want to pause and ask yourself, okay, how many of these things can he do if he were to delay his turn now? Well, the answer is, well, only one of them. First, he cannot do any of the first 3 things. When he delays his turn, he immediately takes persistent fire damage, he loses his AC bonus from his shield, and she stops being off guard. This is spelled out in the delay action itself. It says that any persistent damage or negative effects that normally occur at the start or end of your turn occur immediately, occur right now. You cannot delay bad things. Meanwhile, any beneficial effects that would end at any point during your turn end now. So basically, bad things persist, good things end. The rules are strict here in order to prevent exploits. And by the way, when you actually play out your turn, you do not take the persistent damage a second time. It only says here that the persistent damage that normally occurs at the end of your turn occurs immediately. And as we'll see later, you don't actually get a new turn when you re-enter initiative. Next, he cannot use reactive strike if he's delaying. And this is also spelled out in the delay action. You can't use reactions until you return to the initiative order. This was the rule that I got wrong for a while before realizing this. Next, when he re-enters his initiative, he cannot do any action that triggers at the start of his turn, like his feat, Master of Many Styles. Remember, that was a free action when his turn begins. That's because when you delayed, your turn never ended. You're still in the middle of that turn. It's just being dragged out. It says when you delay, the rest of your turn doesn't happen yet. So you don't actually get a new turn that starts when you re-enter initiative. And in fact, it's spelled out here. It says you can return to the initiative order as a free action triggered by the end of any other creature's turn. Again, your turn is just being stretched out, and you don't start a new turn when you re-enter initiative. Meanwhile, your initiative count changes to the new position, and once you're done with your turn, you have to wait a whole round before you can get your next turn. Basically, the delay action is not saying, I'm going to take my turn later. It is a free action that postpones the rest of your turn that has immediate consequences here and now. Last thing is that he can still do a Whirlwind Strike. He can still do 3 actions once he does the rest of his turn. He doesn't lose any actions by delaying. And of course, he can still use his reactions. He can still do Reactive Strike once his turn resumes again. Okay, question number 4. This is the one where we're figuring out the escape bonus of a monk who's trying to escape. His unarmed attack modifier is plus 18, and that's under normal conditions when he's trying to make a unarmed attack against a foe. But he's using his bonus for the escape action. Okay, so what's his bonus? Well, first of all, being grabbed by the grappling spirit does not affect your attack rolls in this game. So let's get that out of the way. However, being prone does give you a -2 penalty, circumstance penalty, to your attack rolls. And since the escape action has the attack trait, you should get this -2 penalty, right? Well, no, because the escape action is not an attack roll in Pathfinder 2e. This is a mistake that I think I've made before, but it's a very common mistake. It's a very easy thing to confuse. Pathfinder 2e has some of the unfortunate legacy of previous editions where rules around what is an attack are very confusing. For some reason, rules makers like to continue to use the word attack over and over again to apply to different things. An attack roll in Pathfinder is defined as a strike action or making a spell attack. Those are attack rolls. It is not anything with the attack trait. In fact, when you look up the attack trait, it just says that the multiple attack penalty applies to this ability. Now, by the way, if the monk could grapple the grappling spirit back, which it cannot do because it's an incorporeal creature, but assuming that he could, such as if he were to have a ghost touch rune on his hand wraps, then he would not suffer the -2 penalty from being prone because grappling is not an attack roll either. It has the attack trait, yes, but it's not an attack roll. It's not a strike action, and it's not a spell attack. It would be an athletic skill check that happens to have the attack trait. Confusing and unfortunate, but that's the rule. This same logic applies to the Bard's Courageous Anthem, which gives a +1 status bonus to attack rolls. So it helps him in punching somebody for damage, but not in grappling, not in escaping a grappling spirit. Again, he's not making an attack roll. He just happens to be using his unarmed attack modifier for the purpose of an escape attempt. And that's not an attack roll. All right, so it appears that his escape bonus is not affected by any of these things, and so his bonus is +18, right? Well, here's where we get into the weeds. Because part of his +18 bonus comes from his Hand Wraps of Mighty Blows, which have a +1 potency rune. And the potency rune gives you a bonus to attack rolls. So, rules as written, your escape bonus should be +17. However, I don't think this is the rules as intended. I think it's perfectly fine for a game master to allow you to use your normal unarmed attack bonus in this situation, including the benefit you get from potency runes. It's also easier too if you're like running the game in Foundry and you can just click the unarmed attack button. So the answer here is +17 or +18. And that +17 cannot be while you're benefiting from the Bard. Otherwise, you're getting it wrong. Alright, so what about the second escape attempt, which we all know will suffer from the multiple attack penalty? It has the attack trait. However, what is the multiple attack penalty in this case? Normally it's -5. However, when you attack with an agile weapon, such as from a fist attack, it is only -4, at least on the second attack. Then it's doubled on the next attacks. After all, we have a rule in Pathfinder that allows you to use your more favorable agile multiple attack penalty when you are using athletics skill actions, say using your free hand to affect a grapple or a trip. The logic being that you are using a weapon, in this case your free hand, that if you were to make a fist attack with it, that would be an agile attack. So you get to use the -4 penalty when doing a grapple attempt with that hand. Now, what does this mean for the escape action? You can use your unarmed attack modifier. And if you're relying on your fist attack, in this case, it's an agile attack. So shouldn't it be -4 in this case? Well, the jury's out here. And unless there's some comment from the designers, I think a GM could rule either way. Because the counter argument would be that this box up on the top only applies to athletics actions, and the escape action is not an athletics action. And so we fall back to the default multiple attack penalty. Someone might bring up the existence of slippery prey, which, yes, says that you need this feat to reduce your multiple attack penalty to -4, but that's only true if you're choosing to use acrobatics or athletics for the purpose of the escape action. It is agnostic with regard to using your unarmed attack modifier. So I think the answer here is the jury is out. However, I would favor someone applying, in this case, if you're relying on the unarmed attack modifier and assuming they have a fist attack, some monks have stances that make them lose access to their fist attack, that we would use the -4 penalty here, the agile penalty. It would seem that slippery prey here is for when you're using the other bonuses. All right, the last question is the fighter who has been knocked unconscious and was wielding a sword and shield. What does it need to do to get back to form? Okay, let's remember, when you're knocked unconscious, you drop all the items you're holding. However, the language above says that all shields must be strapped to your arm. So I thought to myself for a while, okay, it's strapped to your arm. You don't need to worry about picking it up again because it's on your arm. I told my players, don't worry about picking up your shield. However, I was wrong, because as it turns out, having your shield strapped to you is different from holding the shield for purposes of raising it. And we'll see that when we read the language here. It says that all shields must be strapped to your arm and held in one hand, so you cannot hold anything with that hand and raise a shield. You lose the shield's benefits if that hand is no longer free. So holding it is a separate thing from having it strapped to you. And apparently you can hold anything in that hand, even if it's not a buckler, even if it's a heavy steel shield, as it spells out that you lose the shield's benefits when you do. Meanwhile, it's strapped to you this entire time. Now you might be asking yourself, what's the benefit of a buckler? Well, when you look up the buckler, you'll see that it still lets you raise a shield even when you're holding something in that hand, so long as it's a light object and not a weapon. The buckler doesn't need you to hold it. You just need to have it strapped to you. And so if you're knocked out and you have a buckler, when you wake up again, you don't need to spend an action to grip or hold that buckler. However, that is true with normal other shields. Which brings us to the knockout. Our fighter drops everything he's holding, including the shield. The shield is still strapped to him. However, he's not also holding it when he wakes up because he has dropped it. It's not in his hand. The way I think of it is that a lot of classic shields had two places where you were connected to it, something that was kind of like higher up on your arm and something that you held with your hand. By the way, in the rulebook, it does spell out that detaching a shield from you is an interact action. This is for the rare situation where you're in a combat and you want to strap something different to your arm. You need to unstrap your shield now and then strap something different after. Because if you just want to release the shield, you can do that as a free action and walk around and the shield travels with you because it's strapped to you. This also means that picking up a shield in the wild isn't enough for you to be able to raise the shield. You have to strap it to yourself with a second action after you pick it up before you can raise it. All right, so those are some kind of annoying questions and some rules hang-ups that I had that I wanted to put in a video. Let's have a summary. Number 1 is that stand still does not mean lie still. You don't disrupt the stand action. 2, immunity to critical hits isn't immunity. You can still be affected by special effects that trigger on a critical hit. You're immune to the doubling of the damage only. 3, delay isn't just about changing your initiative. It's a free action you make to postpone the rest of your turn, which plays out later, which has immediate consequences. 4, the attack trait does not make something an attack roll. An attack roll is specifically strikes and spell attacks in Pathfinder. And lastly, you need to hold a shield even if it's strapped to you. So I'm curious, did any of you get these right? If so, you beat the rules lawyer at his own game. Write in the comments how many you got, if you got any. Also, if there are other rules that you've gotten wrong and you consider yourself more than a newbie player, share them in the comments. I'd like to know what I missed and other rules that are easily confused and gotten wrong that the community should know about. So that's it. Megan. Okay, that's my video for today. And if you liked it, click like. And if you want to see my future videos, click subscribe. Also support what I'm doing by supporting my Patreon, which gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. And also join my Discord community. There are thousands of us and I hang out there a lot. We talk Pathfinder and other gaming. And if you want to play Pathfinder 2e, it's your opportunity. We have a drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. So that's it. I've been Ronald the Rules Lawyer, and I'll see you next time.